Hi and welcome to the show. This week we're back with the inspiring Dr. Candy Yumkela. This man's story is so incredible we just couldn't cover it in one show. Doc, you went through a crisis in Sierra Leone in 94, 95 when the war happened there. And it was brutal. I mean, what do you remember of that? You were in your 30s, sort of in your mid-30s at that time. What do you remember about it? Because it was an absolutely brutal time. I covered some of that conflict as well. And I don't think I've ever seen anything as brutal post, the Rwanda genocide and others kind of came along at the same time. But it was on those types of proportions. What do you remember of that?
One of the saddest moments of our history, 11 years of a brutal civil war. The civil war was caused, and I say this, the civil war was caused by 25 years of one-party dictatorship, centralizing everything in the capital, deliberately dismantling democratic institutions, saying they are smart, they know how to hold on to power, going after the traditional chieftaincy system. So there was a lot of animosity built and poverty was deepening. And of course you had a youth revolt. One of our colleagues, Ibrahim Abdallah, and the other guy, Jimmy Kanda, they've written about this, the lumpen revolution. The youth questioning and deciding to go to the bush. And the sad part is, a country that was called the Athens of West Africa because of good education, suddenly deteriorated to the worst form of anarchy, cutting the hands of babies. And you move back 20 years later, when I have gone back 8 months ago, you see the same political party beginning to do the same things to hold on to power, destroying democratic institutions and pushing tribalism, which we didn't have. Fortunately, our war did not deteriorate to tribal. It was a class struggle.
But you see that now?
I see that now, because what happens? When people mess up in governance, they have only two answers to hold on to power. It's deep corruption and the patronage system where they pay off everybody and everybody depends on the largest from the central government and the head of state. Jobs, money, scholarships, and giving favors like the old monarchy in Europe in the Middle Ages. Or they push ethnicity and regionalism. Because then they go back to their people, oh, we are good for you, and the people are dirt poor. I see all of that today, and that's the outrage. That's why I go back and say, did these people forget what caused the war? And now they brag that they're going to hold on to power for another 20 years. And you see them dismantling one institution after the other, strengthening the security forces. That's what the dictatorship did. They demoralized the army, built their own militia. When the war came, there was no army to defend, but the militia was there to protect them. Meanwhile, the kids they trained and sent into the war front came back and overthrew them. But we don't have to go back. We should learn from best practices. Rwanda. I just came here from Rwanda. I go to Rwanda often. You see, they had war as brutal as ours, probably. But they've grown. Best performing on the Millennium Development Goals, best immunization rate. There's no chaos in the city. Our government says to everybody, we're doing grassroots politics. And so everything is populist, distributing cash to people, encouraging chaos in the country. People can do anything in Sierra Leone. And they say it's good, it's freedom. That's not freedom.
This idea of the shortcut to wealth, where even the young people will say, I don't really have a moral problem if I want to make money. I'm quite happy to take that bribe. That to me is the beginning of the end of our structures.
That's the moral decay. That's the moral decay. I believe in wealth, private sector wealth development. In fact, I've been going to Davos and World Economic Forum celebrating wealth. I've been working on building public-private partnerships. I'm a strong believer in private sector-led growth. However, it has to be through systems that are transparent. So even your investment is safe. It has to be through systems that encourages anybody with potential to unleash that potential in entrepreneurship. It cannot be by cronyism. What I see in my country, and I'm very bold to say it because I've made the decision to go home and challenge that moral decay. What I see today, deliberately rewarding people who get appointments, not because of qualification. You take a guy who has never managed 5 people. You ask him to manage a whole pension scheme. And of course the pension scheme died. But of course he was put there so he'll receive instructions about who to give investment money. And here I am in Nairobi talking about how you encourage more African pension systems to do what they've done in Europe and elsewhere. Push for long-term growth, invest in infrastructure, green bonds, stuff like that. No, in our case, it's cronyism, patronage. They tell you where to put the money. And of course, they will be gone in 2 years. And just like what caused the war, they sit back and say, it's not us. But you laid all the foundations. You killed the moral fabric of our children. And I tell you, people are appointed ministers today, and everybody on TV, they're questioning their qualifications. And they're approved. People lie that they have masters for years now, and they go there, you find out the certificate is fake, but he's a minister. Of course he knows that the only way to be a minister is to suppress everybody else. That's not the system I want. But for God's sake, we're 7 million people. God gave us the largest deposit of iron ore in West Africa after the war. It was almost as if God said, fine, you've messed up, now I give you a second chance. We discovered oil and gas. Largest deposit of iron ore in West Africa. The estimate is anywhere between 15 to 20 billion tons for 7 million people. Marine resources. We have some of the most precious diamonds you can think of. Why? Because some of them are colored for jewelry. So Tiffany is interested. All the deals have been wrong in the last 8 years. At a time when you know their best practices about what you do with natural wealth. There's a Norwegian model of a sovereign wealth fund. Yeah? And there are many models. You look at Malaysia, agriculture-led growth. All of these models are there. Our people refuse to look at best practice.
Because it's not best practice for them. That's
Thank you. Because when it is transparent and inclusive, they can't get rich quick. Because in a flat competitive world, it's about talent, it's about commitment.
But they would be able to get rich, much richer, if they thought long term. If the country does well.
That is what I say to people. Look at Asia. It's about long-term growth and development. And the boats are lifted. So the pie becomes big. We might forgive you. I'm not encouraging it. We might forgive you for the 0.001% that disappeared. But when you have a contract, even during Ebola, that is what is sickening. For me, Ebola really exposed to the world how bad people can be. Nurses are dying, yet you take party officials and ghost workers and skim the money off, and your people are dying. You give contracts to people who did not deliver ambulances or bring an ambulance that broke down within 2 weeks. Your people are dying. Just a month ago, a British newspaper said in Sierra Leone they skimmed off £12 million. Until today, they can't settle Ebola victims. For me, I said, this is the culmination of the greed. It's almost like the war. And Ebola is very stubborn. It comes back again.
Stronger than
If
before.
you have corrupted us, it means I can be a victim of Ebola tomorrow. I mean, I was there before it ended. I went there 4 times. I was in international media. You know, Sky, BBC, Al Jazeera, CNN. I was on Quest Means Business, Becky Anderson, demanding that the international community should do more. Meanwhile, your people are skimming off the money.
Yeah. It's very difficult for you to justify that. It's very difficult for you to justify that.
What do we do when Ebola comes back? And yet you see those people today bluffing that they will govern that country for another 10 years. You know, killing the constitution, doing a constitutional review now to give powers to the president to dismiss the chief justice, for God's sake. Separation of powers. It's not about you. It's about building institutions so governance can continue and prosperity can spread. Oh, there are millionaires in my country today that did not exist 5 years ago. And some of these guys believe now that it's a real oligarchy in the worst sense of it.
We'll be right back with Dr. Kande Yumkela. Stay with me. We have The Scoop on Uber, and it's a first free ride of up to 500 Kenya shillings if you use the promotional code The Scoop. To climb aboard, simply download the free Uber application for your iPhone, Android, or Windows phone. Uber and The Scoop, keeping Africa moving. Hi, welcome back. I'm here with Dr. Kande Yumkela. Doc, you are seriously considering going into politics. You've already taken the first steps to go into politics. Challenges that you see on to going down this path?
So going back has been very tough. Yeah? I arrived on the 22nd of August, 2015, and immediately the government was going to put false charges on me and my family. Within 1 week, they were already searching our premises under false accusations. Yeah? So for me, it was a throwback
Yeah, I was
to
about
what
to
I
say
had
that
gone
this
through
is
in the 60s and 70s.
deja vu.
Deja vu. Yeah? 2 days later,